Butler Yeats was born in 1865 near Dublin, but spent much of his childhood on the other side of Ireland in Sligo with his mother's family. This side of the family is what the Republicans would call job creators. His father, however, was an artist, a painter, and an irresponsible one at that. He, in fact, ended his days as a bohemian in New York City, getting handouts from his son. William spent a few years in art school, but most of his education would come from his own studies and obsessions, which included mysticism and theater as well as poetry. Before the 19th century was over, he had made his reputation as the premier poet of Ireland, but he was just getting started. In 1923, he won the Nobel Prize in Literature, but he was just getting started. He hadn't yet written some of his greatest work, including The Tower, which some consider to be his Sgt. Pepper's. This is the first American edition published in 1928, which a friend of mine just gave it to me. Part of the reason why I'm here, actually, why I answered the email. By the time he published that book, he was established as one of the great poets, not of Ireland, but of the English language. There were three women in Yeats's life. Sadly, I'm not including his mother in that list. They were, in order of introduction, Maud Gonne, Lady Gregory, and George Hyde Lees. They were his muse, his mentor, and his wife, respectively. Maud Gonne dragged him into the world of politics. Lady Gregory accompanied him into the world of fairies. I think you know what fairies I mean. And George guided him into the spirit world. She was his medium before she was his wife. Lady Gregory was involved in the Irish literary revival of the time, closely tied to Maud Gonne's politics of a free Irish state. Interest was renewed in local fairy tales and legends. Ancient poems were being translated. The Irish language was being promoted, and Yeats was right in the thick of it, though he never learned Irish. In fact, to talk only about Ireland's influence on Yeats is to ignore Yeats's influence on Ireland. Our conception of Ireland and Irishness was shaped by this man. And the fairies and other pagan beliefs proved very useful to a Protestant poet in a country that was throwing off the yoke of Protestant British rule. An important part of this Irish literary revival was theater. And Yeats was a crucial figure in this arena, even though many of his ambitions were frustrated. In fact, it was in theater, not in poetry, where we can say Yeats was truly avant-garde. His innovations against realism, from dialogue to scenery, influenced all the theater that followed him. But in poetry, he was at an awkward age, already in his 40s and established as a poet when modernism was in full force. Ezra Pound was his secretary. But a great artist is more than avant-garde. Yeats did not fight the tradition. Yeats remade the tradition. There is a striking immediate difference between a traditional Irish poem and a Yeats poem. As I said, these ancient poems were being translated as part of the Irish literary revival, and Yeats was reading them avidly. But such a poem suffers from translation into English, and not only that, from its translation through time. The context and culture surrounding it are lost. Here is an example, a fragment called The Mystery of Amergin, author unknown. I am the wind which breathes upon the sea. I am the wave of the ocean. I am the murmur of the billows. I am the ox of the 7 combats. I am the vulture upon the rock. the sun. I am the fairest of plants. I am a wild boar in volute. I am a salmon in the water. I am a lake in the plain. I am a word of science. I am the point of the lance of battle. I am the God who creates in the head the fire. Who is it who throws light into the meeting on the mountain? Who announces the ages of the moon? Who teaches the place where couches the sun? The beauty of this poem is still apparent, but one sees it as one might see a wandering stream as it flows past. It seems more like the material of nature itself than a work of art. In the Yeats poem, you see the finished, perfect gem. Who goes with Fergus? Who will go drive with Fergus now, and pierce the deep wood's woven shade, and dance upon the level shore? Young man, lift up your russet brow, and lift your tender eyelids made, and brood on hopes and fears no more. And no more turn aside and brood upon love's bitter mystery. For Fergus rules the brazen cars, and rules the shadows of the wood, and the white breast of the dim sea, and all disheveled wandering stars. In this poem, tradition has been fully realized by the individual talent. The boasts of the ancient poem are now used to coax the young man and maid into another world. Myth is now monologue. From anonymous verse, we move to a finished poem, complete with an individual author. This highly individual viewpoint is similar to the introduction of perspective into art in the Renaissance. We have added the drama and focus of a single point of view. Other poets of the Irish literary revival were not always so successful at transcending their material, and often would even say they contaminated it without reclaiming it the way Yeats did. Part of this reclamation included a layer of irony. By irony, I mean a disconnect between meaning and tone, between surface meanings and deeper meanings. In this poem, the irony is not humorous, it's melancholy. First of all, we have the irony of impotence, the simple fact of not being able to go with Fergus. This irony is common enough whenever you discuss going anywhere over the rainbow. But with Yeats, there is always an additional layer of irony. There's always the implicit question, do we really want to go with Fergus? Isn't Fergus a little frightening in this poem? Isn't it disturbing that young people are being taken away from their homes? There is a veil of sorrow over Fergus. His triumphs, even though they echo the boasts of that ancient poem, are coated with ambivalence. The stars are disheveled. The sea is dim.